Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you might be in this fine world. You are listening to the Startup Selling Show, talking sales with Scott Sambucci. That's me. Today's episode is a guest episode, and today's guest is Christine Rogers. Christine is the president and COO of a company called Aspireship. They are a platform designed to match high potential sales candidates with great SaaS companies looking to hire. The way they do this is through a network of candidates who prove themselves through a training and assessment process, and making sure that they're providing the tools to the companies to better discover the talent within their network. So what does that mean? What that means is that Christine and her team do a really good job of sourcing candidates that want to do sales. Then they give them a training program over a 30-day period that has high rigor and tests their sales aptitude. And what that allows them to do is make sure that the people that they are introducing to companies just like you that are out there looking for talent, especially on the sales side, have the opportunity to make sure that the vetting process has been done and that only the best potential candidates can enter that hiring funnel for them. So we talk a bit more about that at the start of the conversation with Christine. So I think it's a really interesting and useful platform, because one of the most challenging parts about hiring salespeople that we see time and time again, and I'm sure you've experienced this yourself, is that every salesperson looks great on paper. And a lot of those salespeople look great and sound great in the interviews. The hardest part about assessing their ability is that it's hard to assess salespeople. And it's not like an engineering hire where you can give them a whiteboard and a Sharpie and say, hey, go solve this problem. It's hard to know if a salesperson is actually good at what they do. So through their platform and through their assessments, they're able to vet out candidates that just don't have the aptitude that you need. And in this interview, in my conversation with Christine, we talked about her suggestions around having a hiring process once you have those candidates in your sales funnel. So a couple of things that you want to listen to in the conversation that I just wrapped up with Christine is number one, we talked about an open question that I think a lot of us have right now, especially, it's late March, early April, 2020. And one of the questions a lot of people have is like, should I be hiring now? So a lot of people have stopped hiring. A lot of people have laid off. A lot of companies out there have thought they would be ramping up their teams. And because of market conditions, there is a natural tendency to just freeze, or maybe even your board is telling you do not hire, do not increase expenses. And so it's an open question, should I be hiring right now? And if I'm going to hire, how do I know now is the right time to hire? So we talked about things like metrics. We talked about thinking through the next 6 months, the next 9 months. What are some of the signals and what are some of the ways we can reduce bloat and expenses so that we can better justify a hire that will help us with growth? So that was the first part of our conversation together. The second part of our conversation really focused on how do we assess the talent pool that's out there? There's going to be, or there is, an influx of labor supply on the sales side of things. And so how do we assess who's actually good versus who just looks good on paper? And so we talked a lot about certain processes that she has, including measuring for specific characteristics that could be around somebody who handles time pressure well, somebody who has good drive, people that are good presenters. And so her perspective is to give the person the job, help them do the job as part of the interview process. And so we walk through her suggestions on how we can actually give our candidates the job. How do we get them to role play? How do we test them for coachability? How do we put them in an environment where they are actually selling and we can see how they respond to certain environments that are as close to real as possible? And what that does is it allows us to do a much better job of assessing their ability to sell. And what she's also found, and she shares this in her conversation with me, is that there are oftentimes where candidates will disqualify themselves out because they'll discover that, hey, this particular job, the way that this job is set up and the work that needs to be done, it's actually not something I want to do or I'm not good at. So instead of you having to disqualify out candidates, by following this particular process that she describes, it helps you, it helps the candidates to remove themselves so you don't have to do that for them. So those are just a couple of the main topics that we talked about. Really enjoyed the conversation with Christine. She's been working with companies and helping them to obviously hire salespeople over the course of her work with Aspireship. And besides that, over the last 15 years, she's done recruiting, hiring, training, and managing of sales teams at companies like Infusionsoft and Booker by MindBody. So she's got a ton of experience in the space, and now she's helping companies like you to find and recruit and hire the best sales talent, which is what you need in order to grow and scale. So that's my intro to the conversation with Christine. And one of the things I want to do is, before we hop over to the conversation, is again, it's at the time that we're recording this and that you're probably listening to this, it's early in 2020. And there's a lot of stuff going on in the marketplace. There's a lot of volatility in the marketplace. There's some uncertainty. And one of the things that we've been doing here at Sales Qualia is trying to do as much as we can to help startups and help companies that are struggling or trying to get a perspective on what they should be doing. We're trying to help them as much as possible. And so one of the things we've been doing is weekly open office hours. So these are open office hour calls, open to the general startup public. We're running a workshop. We're running workshop, at least one in April, and we may do a second one in April or early May to help teams. These would be pretty low investment workshops for you to join to help you build out your sales map and your action plans. We're publishing more frequently on our Facebook business page. So if you go to facebook.com/salesqualia, posting lots of videos, lots of trainings, recordings of our office hours. We want to help as much as possible to really assist any of the companies out there looking for help with navigating through what are some pretty volatile times. And so the very best way for you to learn about all these different opportunities, I don't want to send you to this page for this and that page for that. The very best thing you can do is just go over to salesqualia.com, salesqualia, QUALIA.com. And on salesqualia.com, you can, if you haven't already downloaded a copy of my latest book, Stop Hustling, Start Scaling, when you download a copy of that, then that will automatically add you to our marketing email list. If you've already downloaded a copy of the book, if you purchased a copy of the book, and you just want to add yourself to our email list, there's also a link right there on the homepage where you can add yourself to our email list. And we're sending out notifications every couple of days, either blog posts, videos, or events that we're hosting to help you through this. So definitely recommend going over to salesqualia.com, get yourself on our email list, and we will help you out any which way that we can. So that's it for now. I'm looking forward to your response to the conversation I'm having here with Christine Rogers. So let's head over there to my chat with her. So we're just going to jump right in. We've already been recording, so that's okay.
Oh.
Because I like to make it a conversation so that people listening, they're like, oh, I'm just hanging out in this conversation with Christine and Scott. Okay. So I've got everything here, and I've already done, by the time people got to this part of the recording, I've already done an intro about who you are and even some of the stuff that we will be talking about. And that way it helps people listen into what they should be, kind of topics and that kind of stuff. So
love it.
I love some of the topics that we're going to talk about. So
little meaty right now.
A little meaty right now. So what I'd love to do before we dive in is just, I'd love to hear from you directly when people say, hey, Christine, what is it that you're doing right now? Or what is the focus of your company? How do you describe that to people?
Yeah. So it's the simplest version of this is where sales enablement, preparedness, learning meets kind of recruiting. So it's a little bit of a mishmash there in where we're helping prepare people that are high potential, want to learn, want to grow, want to get into sales, but may not have quite the background or the bullet points or the resume or the time, on books, so to speak, in order to find a great SaaS company, role and really feel like that is something that they want to do. We introduce them once they pass and complete our course successfully. We introduce them to companies that are willing to hire based on actual aptitude rather than just, the bullet point list and their resume.
Yeah, because every salesperson's been top performer, beat quota.
Of course.
Over 20% of goal.
Yes.
Never met a salesperson that wasn't top performer, and at least on the resume.
Totally.
And so I'm curious, like you said, the people that want to get into sales, and I know for me personally, I've been doing sales for 25 years, but it was never something I wanted to do. I did it because I had no other options. I was a history major in college, so I could either go be a teacher, but I had already dropped out of the secondary ed program at my university. I could work in a museum or be like a tour guide, or I could do sales. And so I kind of backed into sales because a friend of mine was doing sales, and he said, you'd be really good at it. So who are the kind of people that actually want to do sales as a transition mid-career? Because it seems like a lot of times people do sales as a vehicle to get into product or marketing or something else.
I think salespeople in general, they have such a bad reputation, pushy, sleazy, and so there's this stigma that goes along with it. So I think you're right. And as nobody like raises their hand in, their freshman year of college and says, I want to be a salesperson. It just doesn't really happen. However, I I hope we're changing some of that in the market and really starting to, as we start to think about value and what we're selling and really alignment with, people's needs and what they need for in what we can offer. And I think over the last few years, that's changed a bit in a positive way. So, the people that we're seeing that are kind of target personas that we're seeing coming through are people that are very in tenure, young in maybe sales. Maybe they've dabbled, maybe they've done a few things here and there, but they thought, I kind of have a knack for this. I don't know what I need to know, and I don't know all the things that I need to do to maybe do a technology enabled sale or software sale. And so they know they need to learn that. The second persona that we're seeing quite a bit of is people that have been in sales for a while. Maybe they've been doing B2C, they've been doing something else, and they've been successful at it, mortgages, real estate, different things like that, but they want to now get into technology, and that's a little bit different too. Also, you and I both know very different in person than it is on the phone or in Zoom, and you kind of have to learn some of those skills in order to feel competent and confident going into a call. So that's what we're seeing quite a bit of.
That's really interesting. So the mortgage, I remember when I was at Blend, we sold a lending platform for mortgage companies. And when I was spinning up the sales team, the customer success team, and we do job postings, we would often get people that were mortgage brokers, for example, or loan officers that exactly like you described. They're like, look, I really love the mortgage industry, but like, I'm just kind of like tired of doing mortgages. I want to help people in the mortgage industry, and I'd love to do technology. I just never had an opportunity because in the mortgage industry, there was no technology until about 10 years ago. And so they saw this as an opportunity. And there was a couple people that come to mind that even though we didn't hire them, I stayed friends with them. And I know like they've moved into product development, they've moved into technology sales and done really well.
Yeah.
But for them, they were sort of the pioneers in this process. And so it sounds like you're helping to reduce the friction in that jump from, say, being a mortgage broker, real estate agent to being a software salesperson. Is that right?
It is. And so we're teaching both the hard skills, that really come from understanding a process. How do you do a consultative sale? What does that look like? What is the process? What is the buyer's journey? Really understanding both the vernacular and the skill set that's critical, but also the soft skills too. So, it's a 20 to 30 hour course. It's not for the faint of heart. You have a time limit that you have to complete it in because we're trying to add some constraint and make sure that we're measuring for tenacity, grit, and the ability to learn. Most SaaS companies are highly changeable. They're consistently moving. And so we want that right persona to really feel good about those things. So we test, for some of those things along the way as well. So I think it's both great for the candidate perspective, but also then for the company perspective. I mean, if you can hire somebody that already knows how to be a good team player, how to line up and ask the right questions in a consultative way, what clawbacks are, what is a commission structure, what should it look like, what questions should you ask, and also, what it takes to be a top performer in this specific area. I think from a company perspective as well, it's going to be very effective, and you'll see, and we're starting to see already now that we've had some people successfully go through the program and placed, they are onboarding faster and they are getting to success faster from a learning perspective because they're already learners. They're proving they're learners. Nobody's making them do this, right? They're already learners. And so they're coming in and they're enthusiastic because nobody else has given them a chance. So they're coming in with a lot of energy, excitement, and really, really driven. So we're starting to see some really great, I had one of our clients say, I've never seen two people ramp faster, Christine. So they are so enthusiastic about the opportunity.
That's really interesting. So I like the idea of the signaling effect of being a learner. You got to go through 20, 30 hours of course.
In 30 days.
Yes.
So that's really the caveat. They only have 30 days to complete it. Most of these people are also in a job. So, doing something else while they're learning. So yeah, there's a little bit of constraint there, and it's for a reason.
So that's really good backdrop to, now, thinking about hiring, there's a lot of different questions you and I were bantering about on email, and there's kind of three questions that we honed in on, and I hope that hopefully we can tackle all three of these, but even if we only get to one or two, I'd rather go deep than wide. So I'll just introduce a couple of the questions here. So one is, like right now, sorting through the talent pool with this influx of supply. So, you're seeing lots of layoffs. You're seeing really, smart, talented people that are getting moved out of their organizations for no other reason other than cost cutting, or companies that are bearing down and trying to protect runway, for example, in the SaaS world or in the startup world.
Sure.
So I'd love to talk a little bit about that, especially juxtaposed against the people who, like, if I'm hiring, I could hire somebody with experience and a proven track record, or I could hire somebody like you're describing who may not have the proper, or sort of, I don't want to say proper, but have the longer history in sales. If I have to choose, why would I choose one versus the other? Maybe I hire one of both, but I'd love to get your perspective on that in terms from a labor supply standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, the question that you introduced, which I love, which is, if I'm hiring, how do I recruit somebody away in a time of instability? Can I do that? And third, should I be hiring right now? I feel like I know the answer to that. But I would love to hear your perspective on it, because you're in this every day talking to companies that are hiring. And I'd love to hear some perspectives for somebody who's on the fence, like, should I hire? Should I not hire? Should I wait? Are there certain roles I should hire now and not hire now? I think just sharing your expertise from your vantage point would be really useful. So
sure. We can start there if you want. if you want to start, should we be hiring?
Yeah, let's start there. I've got no preference. So so should I be hiring? Everyone's saying stop hiring. You got to buckle down. You got to be defensive. You got to protect runway.
So I agree with all those things. I'm also a believer in looking at things from an opportunistic point of view. And I think right now it's very interesting. Yes, take a step back, look at your runway, look at what you have in your specific business, and make some really clear decisions. I would not be reactive. Right away, we all kind of just, panic and stop everything and then figure out where we need to go. Totally understand that. And that's exactly, I think, what every smart leader is doing right now. I can tell you, though, that where I look at it, I think, like, wow, there are some amazing people that are coming into the market. They are going to be very loyal if they are hired during this time. I believe you will be able to get great talent. And I think that when you think about it this way, even a few months ago with unemployment as low as it was, passive candidates were where a lot of us were going. We were trying to get people out of other companies to come to us, right? And it has shifted so quickly in just such a short amount of time that you can get some really good, strong, talented, capable individuals that are absolutely enthusiastic about working for you right now. So I think it's mixed, right? If I needed a role, and I've been looking for it for a while, and that's not going to change. Maybe it's a marketing role, it's a sales role. I'd definitely be able to tie it to what metrics are we going to be looking at that are going to show us that this is absolutely necessary now, and also looking forward a few quarters, like, where are we going to be if these revenue driving roles we just halt? Are there other things that we can cut so that we can make an opportunistic hire? I mean, that's how I would be looking at it. That's how we are looking at it, from that perspective as well. And there are quite a few companies that are going to do very well because they're looking at it like that as well. So that's
I like that perspective a lot. Yeah. I mean, I think about it. People say, oh, I've got a cost cut. I got to watch expenses. My first thought is, well, what were you doing before?
Right.
Like, I thought you run a business. You should be cost cutting. Now, understanding, maybe we're going, you have to massively do some cuts for different reasons, whether it's product people, engineering people, sales people.
Yeah.
But if it's just like, oh, I'm trying to avoid that, expenses or costs. Well, you should be doing that anyway. And in a down cycle, this is the time to invest in growth, right? So yes, cut costs, but invest in stuff that's going to grow over time. And you mentioned about metrics or thinking a few quarters ahead. Mm-hmm. Like, if I can get somebody in place now, if it's an enterprise sale, especially, it could take a couple months to get that person up and running.
Yep.
So here we are, end of March, early April. Maybe it's 3 months of kind of training, development, getting used to the pipeline, doing some calls, shadowing people. So in Q3, Q4, maybe they can be performing. And so use this gift of time as a reason to bring somebody on board.
Yes. And I think you touched on something interesting. A lot of companies do, they see reps performing and they say, oh, well, if these 5 or these 25 can do X, then if we hire 10 more, then we'll get that same number, multiply it by 10 more, and that's not how it works. We know that we have to consistently be helping them grow, learn, develop, get more efficient, shortening the sales cycle, really looking at the ARR, MRR, what are we doing that's showing that we're highly and efficiently growing the team. And I think what happens is we as sales leaders, especially in larger organizations, we look at it and just think, okay, times X amount of people, and we'll still get all of that. And then we bloat an organization. And then what we see is those efficiency metrics come down. And so I think so that's where I think we'll see some trimming of the fat there, is I think that's going to happen. So again, I think you can find some really interesting and great talent right now. I'm seeing tons of like marketing leaders and some customer experience people and, marketing specialists. And tons of sales people that are going to be around, and you're going to need to be able to know how to know if these people are good or not and going to be good for you.
Yeah, I like this idea of if maybe I had float. It's in the engineering world, there's the mythical man month, which is like, we're going to bring somebody on and they'll get 2x productivity. Well, you don't get 2x productivity
right.
If you have one engineer, you hire a second, you don't get 2x. That's been well documented, and it's probably the same with sales.
It is.
And so if I have to cut expenses, let's say I cut 10 sales reps, maybe I can cut 10 but still hire 2. And maybe those 2, I'm still saving on my cost structure, but I'm also reinvesting at the same, because it is that marginal difference between cutting 10 and cutting a net 8 really going to, like, these extra 2, are they really going to make the difference in the balance sheet that's going to like save our company? Or should I just say, look, I've got runway, I've got 6 months to figure this out anyway, so I might as well just go in
and take hired. This time to get them producing and get them very highly effectively producing, so really watching all those metrics, I think, are really key.
And so what are some of the metrics that you've seen companies take to say, okay, this is the time to hire, whether it's in this environment or 3 months ago? What are 2 or 3 things, or do you have any kind of frameworks that you advise people to take a look at to say, okay, based on what I'm seeing, this would mean that I should hire? Or how do they think a few quarters ahead in a volatile environment? Have you seen anything that works pretty well for other people?
Well, right now, I think everybody is looking at the revenue model and deciding, like, are we going to make adjustments? How are we going to do it? Maybe they're looking at, the marketing spend and pulling some of that down. And so they're going to need to shift. Like, I think they're probably looking at a little bit of a different persona. So maybe before, and I'll give you an example and we can talk through some of this, maybe before I had a couple SDRs, or, I did something like, where I prepped or had a lot of inbound, and then maybe it was colder inbound and I had SDRs reaching out to it. And so, there's a little bit more CAC included in one sale. So if I'm thinking about, like, how do I lower some of that, I'm looking for people that maybe have a little bit more ability to maybe full cycle sell. So, take it from soup to nuts all the way through. So I might shift what I'm looking for in my persona based on where I need to go. Maybe I don't at all. Maybe that model still works for me. But those are some of the considerations that I would be thinking of is, okay, if I have to do more with less, or at least the same with less, what is that I can do? And I know a lot of people have a lot of different opinion about SDRs and AEs and how those all work together. I'm kind of not really thinking about that right now. I'm just thinking about it. If I had a nut that I had to crack and I'm that revenue owner and I got to get there by the end of the, Q4, what am I looking at as levers? And I think it's always good. And we're talking a lot about upskilling. So if you are an SDR, think about what do you need to do to be more effective, is to learn what comes after you. If you're an account executive, you better really know how to qualify as well, because in 2 seconds, it could be that conversation called, can you take it from here to here if we get rid of these pieces here? Or can you outbound more? How are you at prospecting? Like, you need to make, I think about it from the candidate side and from the current employee side, you need to make yourself invaluable. And then from the company side, really deciding what are those efficiency metrics? How long are my sales cycles? Am I seeing conversion rates differing by rep? What are they doing differently? How is maybe the management team? How's that working? Are there differences between teams and managers? And, I'm looking at all of those things, and really what I always look for is anomalies. When people are doing, wow, that is great, they're doing way better. And that's an anomaly I'm going to dig into. when somebody is really struggling or a team is struggling or we're struggling in general, and we weren't before, those are some things that I dig into and then look at what are the differences that are happening, so I get really kind of very hands-on tactical there.
Yeah. I like the anomaly approach because we have a guy in our group, in our coaching group, and he manages a 10-person sales team, and he's got one rep that's at like 150% of goal as of like third week of March.
Yeah.
So I'm like, dude, you got to go talk to that guy and figure out like, what is he doing? And he said, well, I tried to talk to him before. And he's like, well, I've got my own thing and I got my own style. And I said, that's fine. Like, you're not trying to replicate what that person does, but you're just looking for some ideas that maybe he can share with the rest of the group. So they go, well, this is how I'm doing it. And then they could translate it over. So those anomalies can be really useful to pass through. And maybe there's certain markets that are more responsive than others, especially right now.
Yeah.
So we've had this with another group. Yeah. We have a group right now, like they're selling mostly to like the trade market. So like plumbers, HVAC, electrical, people that are out there on the field every day and their teams are on the field. And we were talking yesterday in a call and they said, for whatever reason, the electrical contractors are picking up the phone. Like nobody else is picking up, but the electrical contractors are. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. So why is that? And we started digging into it and we realized there's a specific reason why we think those trades, just the electrical contractors, are picking up the phone more. So that's the anomaly. Let's just go sell to those people. Mm-hmm. And maybe when it comes to hiring, you go, hey, I'm going to go hire somebody using your method. It's like, oh, I need somebody who has experience in the electrical market and wants to sell software. Perfect fit. We can plug that person in and get a really quick ROI because they already have knowledge of the market and now they know how to sell software.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think, so the one other thing I would say to your groups and the different people that are listening to this is don't be afraid to get on the phone and just listen. I mean, when I am trying to figure out what is going either right or wrong and trying to orchestrate what are my next steps, I am listening for hours a day, sometimes to calls. What are the leads coming in? What are they thinking is happening? What is the marketing doing? What is there some messaging that's off? Are we getting what we want from it? And then I start really listening to those, need conversations as fast as possible. So whether you're using whatever modality you're using, if you can't listen to calls, you have to be able to listen to calls. So that guy who is at 150% to goal or, right now, man, I'd be all over him listening to those calls. What is he doing differently? And just out of complete curiosity, but also, this is exciting stuff when you see somebody doing it really, really well versus the other. And so I think that is one of those things where sometimes as leaders, we think like, oh, I don't really want to do that. Instead of listening to music, I just listen to calls. I'd turn it on. I'd be cranking things out. I'm like, whoa, that was an interesting. I love that line. I love that she said that. And then I'd be like, boom, I just heard this awesome call and this is what was said and that locked it in. And, sometimes it's just those little things that we hear differently, than a frontline manager sometimes. So yeah, I'd encourage you, got to get your hands dirty right now. Like you just have to.
Yeah. And some of the instability in the market, maybe that one rep has figured out a way to message your product in a new way to the same market that you're addressing. So if you can pull that anomaly off, like figure out what that is, then also from a hiring standpoint, maybe it's like we need to find people who have sold or been through a recession before. Like how many people in the sales force in the labor supply have never experienced this because they've been in the market for 10, 12 years and it's always been up. But what if I went back and hired somebody who's, in their 40s or 50s and they sold through financial market or they sold through 9/11.
Yeah.
Like having that kind of experience, even if they didn't sell through it, but they've lived through it and they've done business through it, like having that sort of badge on them, I think can help them relate to customers now more than ever, perhaps. It's just another way to think about why you should hire now and who you should hire now.
Well, there's that mental toughness, right? That is, that's super important in sales. And a time like this, I mean, it was so interesting. Today we were talking in our team meeting, I read this book quite a while ago about like survival and survival guides. And it was so interesting because one of the most important little tidbits that came through all the book, how people survived through a stampede or how people survived through all these different things. was how quickly people went from, oh my God, this is happening, this can't be real, to action. And he had this amazing statistic that was something like, if they could get moving, actually move their feet and move within like under a minute, their chance of survival went up by like 80%. And so it was just about, we all kind of are sitting here going, oh my gosh, this is like crazy. How is this happening right now? And we, not just right now, but there are those moments in our businesses as well throughout the year where we have these moments like, oh my God, why is this happening? And we have to get to the place where you go, this is happening, this is real, and like, we got to move. And so I think that that's kind of how I feel right now about where we're at as, kind of the global state is, trying to figure out what to do. And we're all trying to make the best decisions possible, but that mental toughness is really big.
Was that book called Deep Survival?
It was one of those. I think it's like the Survivor's Guide or something. I mean, it was fascinating. I just got into a mode where I was reading like 5 survival books. I don't know what I thought was going to happen, but I know.
Well, my wife shared a book with me called Deep Survival. It's called, the subtitle is Who Lives, Who Dies, and Why.
Yes, it was one of those. Yes.
And they're just breaking apart these situations where people were able to survive or not, and what happened. And you're right. A lot of it's just like their mental state, being able to acknowledge what's happening, accept it, and then start taking some kind of action.
That's right. That's right.
And so this kind of is like backing into our second, one of the questions I wanted to ask about, which is like, who do you hire in an environment like this? So the town pool has got this influx of supply. So who's actually good versus who looks good on paper? And so I know that a lot of teams, they don't necessarily have a consistent way of vetting out sales. Like, how do you test sales? I mean, obviously you've got your platform for doing it, but if it's an engineering hire, you go like, here's a problem on a whiteboard, go solve it. I can see how good you are and how you think. Sure. How do you do that in sales? Like, how do I assess the people that are coming into this labor pool, getting lots of resumes? They all look pretty good, but I don't even know where to start. How do you think about that?
So I think that's really good. Number one, you have to have a process. So you need to create a consistent process. It doesn't need to be long, lengthy. A lot of people have this, a little bit of a, oh God, I don't know what to do. You just need to have a process. I'll give you a good example of one that I've used for hundreds of sales reps that I've hired over the last few years. But number one, I always start with, what are the characteristics that I'm going to measure for? And I make sure that I've got those characteristics, and that each piece, each question, each project, whatever we're doing, each piece lines up to, this is solving for showing me that they have this. So sometimes I'll give them time limits on things. I'm trying to create a stressful environment so that I'm able to see what they can do when under pressure. So for instance, we'll take like a sales, and then we'll take a non-sales, because I think they're both interesting, but really the same methodology really works. So in sales, I want them to do the job. And in really every role, I want them to do the job, because I want them to self-select out if this is not for them. So first, yes, we'll look at a basic, just make sure they're who they say they are. I always kind of bookend with culture, company alignment. And then in the middle, we're testing for, do they like this job? I'm giving them the job right then in that time. And that's the project that they're doing. So they really clearly understand what they're signing up for. So in sales, we're going to ask questions up front. I'm basically doing a discovery call. Why are we talking today? What are you interested in? Really understanding what their motivation is and why we're having this conversation. And I'm, really take on the position of, I'm kind of selling them on the role as well, but I'm doing basic discovery, making sure there is alignment with the company organizational priorities, with the company, values and different things. So I'm just kind of making sure that that's there. The second piece in sales would be that I actually have them do a part of the job. So they're going to probably role play with either me and a manager. I always test for coachability and agility. In that, those are two things that I always test for. And the way I do it is I have a pretty scripted out role play. Like, we know exactly kind of where we're going with this. I give them what they will receive for a lead. Or maybe for you have an old lead, like I literally give them what they would get from Salesforce and then call me, and call this number at this time or Zoom this number at this time. And then we roll through it. And that 3 minutes in, I push on price and tell them I don't have this and blah, 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 blah. And then I actually have one of my managers stop the call and say, okay, I'm going to give you a couple pieces of feedback. And then they stop it. They give them the feedback. We only give 5 pieces of feedback. So there's one of the 5. So I make it really consistent. So I'm able to, as consistently as possible, measure. And then I say, call back in 2 minutes. We're going to roll it again. And then we see what they can do quickly. So now I've actually had people not call back. I mean, because they're stressed out. Yeah, multiple times. I've actually had people argue the feedback. I've had people not understand the feedback. So when I say you need to build a little bit deeper rapport and you need to, maybe reach out a little bit more in a more consultative way, they're like, I don't understand what you're talking about. I've had people Google things, in that very short 2 minutes, trying to figure out what they're supposed to do. So it's interesting because I'm giving them the job. And if you don't like this, if you don't like that pressure, if you don't like having to do this, and then this isn't for you. And that's okay. That's totally okay. And that's one example of how I would actually have them do the job. There's a lot of different ways that people do this. It's just one that worked really well for me.
Wow.
What? I don't know whether that's
awesome. That was, so it's like, wow, my brain is really spinning here on a couple of levels. It reminds me a little bit of, to Jason Fried from Basecamp, 37 Signals. So they have he's publicly talked about this process they have for designers, for example.
Okay.
Where they'll hire, as part of the interview process, they'll pay for a project. They'll say, here's a project, we're going to actually pay you. So, we value your time. And he's of course looking for aptitude, like, is this person a good designer, but also looking for their ability to accept criticism. So he says, you did this with this design. Why did you do that? I would do it differently. And I remember one of his interviews, he talks about this one designer who was like very open to criticism and said like, wow, that's a really good point. And I should have done this differently and I should have done that differently. And he said, immediately I knew she was going to be a great fit because she was willing to accept criticism.
Yeah.
So I love this model of putting them in the job to see if they can do it.
Yeah.
I'll give you another. Testing their coachability because they're going to get lots of coaching like nobody knows everything.
And so I'll give you another example of one that I did, because I also had enablement teams. So these were analysts and trainers and different things like that. So I would give them the job as well. So take time to think, what am I trying to create? What are the things I'm trying to measure for? So one of my roles was an analyst. And as an analyst, I need them to be able to not get so paralyzed by the data that they can't give me, I need right or left by 3 p.m. I don't need it to be perfect. I need 60% accuracy. And tomorrow you can give me 80. But today by 3 p.m., this is what I need to know. Are we going right or left? And so I would give them, and this is where, an analyst personality can get really tied up and really wound up, kind of wrapped around the axle about the details and the data and all these things. And in that role, that's reporting to me, that's giving me those insights, that's super important and timely, not workable. So I would say this is a 2-part assignment. I'm going to give you some data. By 7 p.m. tonight, I need you to give me about 65% accuracy on what you think is going to happen. And tomorrow at 8 a.m., I'm going to give you another piece of the assignment. So I would tell them straight up, because knowing these are analytic types of people, right? The next morning, I would say, now that you've had a chance to sleep on it, what do you want to add to it? Because they always were going, I wish I would have told her this, or I wish I would have said that, or, and so I'd let them clean it up a little bit, because really that's the job. And again, people self-select out, which is what we want. If we can create for them the role, but also the environment, like they're dealing with me. If you can't handle my pace and my energy and my excitement and my enthusiasm, but also my rigor, this isn't going to be a good fit for you. So I want them to feel all the things so that when they get in the role, they're not just like, oh yeah, I got a new job. They're like, I got the job for me and I am loving it, and they are loyal. They are loyal when you do that. So I think if you can create an environment where you can absolutely, create a setting that is the job, then you will have enthusiastic people that will follow you anywhere.
I just got this great job. I work for this mad scientist named Christine Rogers. She's insane. I can't wait to tell my friends about it.
She's insane, but she loves it. She's crazy, but she loves me and she appreciates me, and we are having a good time doing this stuff,
No, that's true. By the way, if I had to change my headphones to my AirPods, usually my AirPods die, and then I put on my over-the-ear headphones. But in this case, my over-the-ear headphones battery died, and I switched to AirPods. So you have them do the job, and then so you mentioned something I want to just make sure that gets through here, because you mentioned it in passing, and I think it's really important. You said you start with culture, mission, values, then you go into the tactical, do the job, give them the job, and then you come out of the process assessing again for culture alignment, those sorts of things.
Yes. So where we will lose most people is right in that middle. Can they do the job? Right. So you're going to get people through the chute that are, especially in this market, people are going to look really, really good, and they're going to be enthusiastic because they really want the job. Okay. So you're going to get a lot of people through the chute there. Then you're going to lose a bunch of them in the middle. I used to lose probably half in the middle because they really couldn't do it. They couldn't do the job, or they couldn't do it well enough for what I needed in my specific role. Then we get to the end. And, so when those are the in-person interviews, those final interviews, those ones that we're doing, face to face. And I'm really careful about those. So we're looking for strong alignment, not that they are just telling, we use a lot of, tell me about a time. And I think people are prepared for those. One of my favorite ways to do this is I usually have people, they're very nervous. They're very nervous in that first, one, especially if you have a couple people in the room, which if you can do that, I do that. Because again, can they handle the pressure? I'm not trying to make a pressure cooker, but like we're all friendly, but a couple people really does do well in my experience. I usually have them start. I put 5 things on the whiteboard, hand them the marker, and I just say, just walk me through. Tell me, 1 to 5, what's the most important to you here? And they're all 5 good things. Maybe it's like, culture and fit to the company values and career progression, or financial gain. So I have them and I ask them, just give them to me in order of importance. And I just want you to talk to me about them. And I'm watching, first of all, it loosens them up a little bit, gets them talking. Can they talk in front of the group? Can they defend? Sometimes it's defending a little bit, are they defensive about it? If we ask questions because, maybe they're putting, this would be very funny. I'd always get sales reps. I mean, I'm talking like aggressive personalities that are like, I can tell they're strong, dominant personalities. They put financial gain as the 5th, the least important. I'm like, really? And so is that true? Like, because you just told me that you're a rock star who's made a ton of money and you want to come here and you're telling me that financial gain comes after, personal development. I don't know. I don't know if I believe you. And so we have an interesting dialogue. They get to know, and I'm getting to know them, and I'm getting to see, and I can tell you, the more you get them talking and loosening up and relaxing, the more you can see, like, are they a culture fit? Are they going to, do they have some enthusiasm and passion? Are those traits that we started with at the beginning that we said that we have to have these characteristics, are they showing up? And I make sure that the questions that we ask are the same questions that we ask everyone. So it needs to be consistent. We're not off the cuff. I have a list of 10 questions. These are the ones we're all going through, and so that everybody has a really fair, consistent experience as much as possible.
Yeah, I like the group thing a lot because, if you're doing enterprise, like software especially, or any enterprise sale, not every call and every meeting is going to be with a group, but there's going to be some point in the sales process where, whether it's on Zoom or and online or in person, you're going to have a group of people, and you've got to be able to figure out what are the dynamics in the room that I should be paying attention to.
Yes.
And if there's one person that's kind of a detractor, watching how that person handles maybe somebody in your team that is a little grouchy that day, not intentionally, but there's just like a little, they just found out some code blew up and, they lost a big deal or something, and just seeing how they respond to those group dynamics. I love that idea for sure. And then, this notion of creating a conversation, I think also getting like some diversity in that room as well. So you're a woman, obviously, right? And you're running this company. And how does somebody respond if it's, there's a lot of criticism around, and rightfully so, the bro culture that's out there. And it's like, you got a sales manager who's male, and their enablement person's male, and the ops person is male, and you're hiring a male account rep. Like, let's get some women in the room, because if I'm going out and selling to the enterprise, I remember, I used to sell to Wall Street, And there weren't a whole lot of women in the room when I was
Yeah.
selling. But one thing I did learn is that if there was a woman in the room, she was probably the smartest person in the room.
Yeah.
Right? Because like
totally.
she really
had to get there.
work
That's right.
to get there. Right?
Yeah.
And just like, how does that person respond to gender? How do they respond to different races? Getting people just to make sure that we're good. I mean, because some of those things they can get swept up if it's just like a bunch of one-on-one.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think those are solid points. I mean, paying attention, reading the room. I mean, I have at points, stopped an interview and said, can you tell me, like, just read the room. What do you think's happening right now? How do you think this is going? Especially if I really liked this individual and they were not showing up well, and I'm trying to, really work with them just to say, this is like, read the room, read my face, especially if they were not talking to me. They're talking, I'm asking a question, they're answering these other people. And I'm like, what is going on right now? So being authentically yourself also as the interviewer, I think is good, especially if they're going to work with you. They need to understand your personality as well. And, I think sometimes we, put on a front, because we're trying to be very specific about what we're doing. And this is an environment where we're trying to connect. The people that we connect with that work with us are going to be the ones that are the most loyal, dedicated, and are going to do the best work, the way they're going to give you 110% every day, always, because they care about what we're doing. They care about you. They care about the company. They want to make an impact on the customers. I mean, those are the people, and you can feel that. You need to work on that connection, and you can do that in an interview process. You absolutely can.
Do you ever get customers involved with the interview process? Just curious. I've heard people ask me if they should do that or not.
I haven't. That would be interesting. From a sales perspective, I never have. I would also think that might be interesting from a customer experience perspective.
Yeah. Just wondering, like, if you had like one really good, like a good customer that's been around for a while, and say, listen, man, like, I got this candidate. I just want to get a feel from, would you buy from this person? Does that person make you feel comfortable?
Interesting.
Seems like it'd be worth experimenting on it, because if they're the ones that are going to be ultimately buying, like, we can all feel good about the hire and they test well. But if there's something weird about that person, that they're giving off some weird vibe that we don't detect. People have asked me that question. I was just curious what your perspective is.
I also think too, I would caution, because we're going to see such a large influx. I definitely want to say going just off of resume is not what I would be doing right now. I would absolutely look for, are there pieces in here? Are there, as far as what we're looking for in an individual, past muster on the resume. Okay, sounds good. And then get into the nitty gritty of that process. But vetting on the front end is really, it is important, but it's not based on, like, I have seen so many people come in and I've hired them, prior in years past based on, man, they just crushed it at blah, 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 and then have just, not shown up the way that we thought would be. And it's risky to do that, really risky.
Interesting. And so one last question on this, sort of like, sure. I have a lot of questions, but on this topic for now. So what do you tell, I mean, you work with CEOs that are hiring, managers that are hiring, and they get a candidate that is pretty close. They're like, wow, we've been recruiting for 3 months. We've gotten through this process, and this person is like pretty close to what I'm looking for, but they're not perfect. And like, on the one hand, it's easy to say, oh, you need to be patient to find the perfect candidate. On the other hand, you're like running a business. You got to get somebody to plug the hole. And right now the territory has been open for 6 months, or it's a growth opportunity and it's not getting addressed. How do you help somebody decide whether or not to go forward with the candidate or not? For someone how do you get them to say no to somebody who's on the fence? If there's even a question or a doubt, you should say no. I'm curious what your perspective is on that.
That's a really good question.
How do you get people to think through that?
So I would question where the deficit is. So I kind of look at it, and maybe I oversimplify these things, could be, but what I look at is like, is it that there's something maybe, so kind of skill versus will? Is there something culturally? Is there something that I'm not getting from maybe they just don't quite have the drive, or I haven't quite seen it, and there are some things that are like red flags for me around something like that. So let's say, when I call the candidate, he doesn't call me back till the next day, or he doesn't, he's a little slow. And so those are like red flags to me as far as if you're looking, if you're excited, if you're like, on me about this job, then I expect quick response pretty much by the end of the day. So let's say this candidate is a little slow. So I'm now having a question around drive. I'm having a question. So I would actually test for that. Can I, so I would do something there that said, and I have done this before when I've been concerned about people. I said, I'm going to bring him in, or I'm going to do a Zoom, on this, and we're going to address this specifically. And I'm just going to say, here's what's going on. I need you to pick these 2 times. And if this doesn't go this way, we're a no on him, and so I'm clear beforehand. This is what I'm looking for to have happen in this. If it's more of a skill deficiency, can they learn? Have I tested them on that learning capability? And so I would test them that way. So if I got to that point and I still didn't know, but man, I had a feeling that maybe this was the right person, then I would say, what are my problems? What are they missing? Or what am I concerned that they're missing? And can I test for that to see if it's possible to get them there? If not, I'm a no. Like I don't want to, I'm not going to do it, so. But I do like, there are those people that you have this feeling about that you're like, and so I test for it. So I get a little bit, every time I get a little emotional, I take a step back and I think, wait, how can I almost scientifically test for this to see if this is possible? And I put together kind of a way that I'm going to test to see if I can get them there. Or I'll just tell them straight up, I'm really concerned that you don't have enough drive. And here's what you've showed me through this process. And I want your reaction, and I'll just see what they say, so obviously I'm a pretty direct person, and I feel like I have a pretty good BS, I could sense it pretty well. So I feel like, those are some of the tactics that I've used in the past, especially when it's like a one-off role. That's where I find it to be most challenging. When it's repetitive roles, like I'm hiring a couple different tech support, or I'm hiring, salespeople, like I get in that. I kind of feel like I've got the gist of what I'm looking for, and I can tell if somebody's wobbly, I'm a no. But if it's these one-off roles, sometimes I don't quite trust my instincts as much. And so, I get back right on the test and I go test for it.
Yeah, I think a lot of good takeaways there. The one thing that sticks out for me is deciding ex ante. So going into the conversation, like you said, I'm gonna test this person for their drive, and going into this call, there's 2 outcomes. It's they're either going to go left or right, and if they go left, they're out. And it's not, I'm going to get on the call and see how it goes and let that influence my decision. You're basically making the rubric before you walk in, and that allows you to stay objective. And I think as a founder of a company or owner of a company, I think it's also important maybe to share that with your team. Say, okay, here's where we are, team, or hey, co-founder, or hey, VP of engineering, whatever that is. Even if the engineering person doesn't know anything about sales hiring, say, I want you to just come observe this conversation. Yes. You're going to be on Zoom, but I just want you to sit over there. You don't have to be on Zoom, but going into the call, these are the things that I'm looking for. I want to know if this candidate's going to go left or right. If they go right, they're a yes, or at least they're not a no yet. If they're left, they're definitely a no. And I want you to just listen in or watch the recording. You tell me.
Yep.
Did they go left or right?
Perfect.
Just getting that objective viewpoint, it helps to remove the emotional component, because as an owner of the company, there's nothing that I mean, aside from my family, there's probably nothing I care more about in this world than my company.
Yeah.
And I'm so emotionally attached to it. That's why I'm stay up and work until my eyes bleed, because I want this thing to work. And I'm I want to get people to help me. So you have to remove that emotional component. So I like how you're constantly, how do I get objective and test for this? And then that way it helps me make the decision that's best for the company.
And the other thing too is, as the, whether if you're as the final say, I've had moments where I looked around and I kind of was like, okay, we're all feeling like, this person doesn't quite have it, but I'm going to go ahead. I have this, I think they're going to be okay. And I've had those moments. I think we all have, where we've made those decisions, those hires that haven't gone well, maybe, and, coming back to the team and saying, man, you guys were right. And, I should have listened, and I'm going to learn from it. And that's okay. And just owning it. It's, we're all going to make hires that we shouldn't have made. We're all going to, but it's a learning process. And I think we can do a lot of things to make this easier on ourselves and not make it quite so emotional or draining, because it can be, especially that vetting portion. I mean, that's part of the reason why we created Aspireship, is so that we can partner with our hiring partners and say like, hey, use our vetting product. They can do it in product. They can be assessed in product, and you can watch them do this to see if they can. That's why we did it, so that it can alleviate some of that burdensome bits, those burdensome bits at the front. Yeah. But, just give yourself a break. This stuff is hard. And because we care about our business, but we also care about people. And right now, everything is heightened and emotional. So, as much as you can think ahead, create a process, make it as prescriptive as possible while still allowing, some of that human element, I think is the way I would go right now in this current environment.
Cool. I love this. I think that's a great place to wrap. I learned a ton.
Okay,
as always.
good.
I'm very I selfishly love doing this podcast, not only because it's good to help people learn stuff, but I also always learn stuff. So I get like an hour of free consulting from people like you every time I do a podcast. So.
Well, thank you for having me. It's awesome. I love your question.
Yeah. Thank you. And like, where could people go? Where do you like to direct people if they say, hey, I want to learn more about Aspireship. Sure. I want to learn more about Christine. Where's the best place for them to go and check out what you're doing?
Totally. Well, aspireship.com is our website, and we have everything there from a candidate perspective. So if you know people that, want to get into sales, or interested or want to, like I said, upskill, they want to learn more, they can do that there. And also, we have an entire hiring partner page as well that really breaks down how we partner with companies and how we can assist with some of the heavy lift that is, going on when you do this hiring. So also, I'm on LinkedIn. Our team is on LinkedIn. We're pretty active on LinkedIn. We get in those sales conversations, hiring conversations, and love all that. Love learning as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can also attest to your work, because we were introduced by a mutual friend who's one of our clients here in our program.
Yes.
And he's worked with you for a recent hire.
I know.
And I've had that person on one of our coaching calls, and I'm like, that was a good hire. I think
he's so good, isn't he? He's so great.
Yeah.
Such a great hire. So we're so proud of him.
It's an N of one, but so far the experience has been good. So I'm
love
really
it.
glad that
I love hearing that.
Glad that Daniel put us in touch, and really appreciate the time that you've given and the expertise. And so definitely check out Aspireship.com, and we'll put that in the show notes. And then as soon as we get the show, this particular episode done and wrapped up, we'll send you a little kit to publicize it with your network as well. Share it with your tribe.
Awesome. I can't wait. This is so great. Thanks so much. This has been really fun.
All right.
Okay,
yeah, me too. Care. I enjoyed it too. All right. See ya. Bye.
Bye.
All right. That is my conversation with Christine Rogers. So I took a ton of notes there, and I'm just going to highlight a couple of the key things here, just to kind of give you a few bullets as you're wrapping up your listening of the episode. So a couple of the key things that I looked at that I took away from here, I wrote down the word bloat. So, right now, it's end of March, early April, and a lot of us are looking at ways to cut expenses. And frankly, we should always be looking at ways to cut expenses. And there's an opportunity, I think, to get rid of some bloat that we may have in our sales process when it comes to customer acquisition costs and people, and even some software that we might be paying for that we're not necessarily using or getting really clear ROI on. And so once you've done those cost cutting, then the next step really is to take a step forward and advance out and say, okay, I've taken steps back, I've gotten defensive, I've reduced cost. Now, where can I start building again? And I think that approach of getting clear on what are the real metrics that I should be hiring? What does it look like in 6 months if I could get a person that's highly functioning in a sales role? How would that change the trajectory of my company? How would that change how we're selling and how we're doing every day? So I think that's really a two-step process. Like, yes, remove the bloat, remove the expenses, and then look at how you can start taking forward steps again and advancing. So that was one kind of big bullet point. The second thing that we talked about quite a bit was the importance of having a process. So just like having a sales process, just having an engineering or product development process, we've got to have a process for hiring. And I really like her description of her process, where it starts with alignment around culture, mission, and values, then moving into a tactical interview process, give them the job. And she rolled through all kinds of ways specifically you can role play, give them opportunities, and then also test for their coachability within that sort of tactical give them the job part of the interview. And then completing the interview process again, circling back to the culture, alignment, mission, values part. So that way you're making sure that only the right fit people, potentially from a personality culture standpoint, are you going to make it into the deeper part of the process. And then, and only then, the people that make it out of that tactical part of the process, you want to assess them again just to make sure that they are a good fit and will be a positive addition to the team. So that's something else we talked about as well. And then the last piece that we talked about in the conversation was just really kind of going through, like, how do I make decisions? How do if I have a candidate that could go either way, how do I decide whether or not to move forward or not? And making decisions ahead of time. And this is really part of having a good process, making decisions ahead of a call, ahead of an interview. I'm looking for certain things. I'm looking for a certain outcome from this call. If I don't get this, then the person is a no. It helps us to stay objective, because hiring and anything related to your business is highly emotional. So the more we can stay objective and follow this process, the better that we're going to do. So those are just a couple of the key things that I took away from my conversation just now with Christine. Again, do check out Aspireship. I mentioned that she is working with one of our clients. That's how I met her in the first place. A mutual friend of ours introduced her to me, and we chatted a couple of weeks ago just to get to know each other. And I immediately said, hey, we should get you on the podcast because I'd love to have you share your expertise with our audience. So definitely check out what she does over at Aspireship, and could be a source of talent for you, or at least another source of talent. It doesn't have to be the only source, but it's definitely one that's worth checking out, especially in an environment right now where there's some instability and you're trying to figure out talent pools. So thanks so much for listening. This is Scott Sambucci signing.